Welcome back to Draft Talk. I am Tyler Brook. I am joined this week by a very special guest. He's one of my favorite follows on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Even if I'm not a Patriots fan, it is Taylor Kyles. Taylor, how you doing, man?
Doing well, man. A fan of yours as well. Obviously, very excited to be on and just appreciate the invite, man.
Yeah. Heck yeah, man. No, it's great to have you on. Like I said, I always appreciate a beat reporter that also dives into the film. I think you do a great job of doing the best of both worlds. And the reason I wanted to have Taylor on specifically, this is more of a draft general show. This is actually one of the first non-Packers episodes we've done on the channel. I loved the Patriots draft class. I've always been super high on Drake Maye. But before we dive into any of that, Taylor, I got to ask you, I feel like this Patriots GM search thing is one of the weirdest stories that's not getting a lot of coverage right now in the NFL. Elliott Wolf's the de facto GM, but they're in a search. So what can you tell us about what's going on right now?
Yeah, so obviously when the team and Bill Belichick mutually parted ways, then it kind of just started a whole reset of the organization. The plan, I don't think, was for Belichick and the team to kind of separate this soon. I think they were expecting him to be around for another season, which is when, Javon Baker was already set to be his replacement. They had talked to the league about it, I believe, before this season. That kind of happened faster, and then the GM search became very much more immediate. And as you know, by the end of the season, a lot of the work that these guys are doing, obviously before combine and all that stuff, a lot of that work's already been done. You send your scouts out, you follow these players throughout the season. So I think what the plan was, before the draft, let's not start bringing in new people who might shake things up and have a weird, maybe power struggle or awkward dynamic. Elliott Wolf has been running a lot of this. Let's just give him the power. Matt Groh was also involved, even though their titles are kind of awkward because Matt Groh is the director of player personnel and Elliott Wolf is the director of scouting, but really they're doing the opposite where Wolf, because he's got so many connections in the league, was really doing more the free agency and the overall roster building, whereas Matt Groh was really the one who was at the Senior Bowl, really doing a lot of the stuff involving players. So all that to say, they basically gave Elliott Wolf the de facto general manager title just so he, actually had the power and everybody knew who they were answering to. Now that the draft is over, they have to actually name someone, at least not even just necessarily general manager, but someone with the title of lead personnel executive. So now they have to satisfy the Rooney Rule, which is, I think, a big reason why they didn't hire Elliott Wolf to begin with, because you would have had to start interviewing people.
Got it.
Now, I am not a huge fan of the Rooney Rule. I think it does some great things in giving people opportunities they normally wouldn't have. But then you run into awkward situations like this. The Patriots actually did have 2 minority candidates come in for interviews, so I believe that it is satisfied. But at the same time, they tried to interview 3 other people who were pretty high-ranking executives, at least were at some point, and they all declined to come in because reports are that Elliott Wolf is going to get the job, and it's not really a competition. So it made sense that those guys were I'm not going to come in for a sham interview, or, I appreciate you wanting to give me an opportunity, but no thanks. I really think the interviews they're doing are more kind of like with Adrian Clem last season, where they brought him in for the offensive coordinator search, but really were interviewing him as the offensive line coach. I think that's kind of what's happening now, but I think Elliott Wolf is more than deserving to be the Patriots general manager, the head of the personnel department, whatever they want to call it, for what he did in free agency in terms of keeping a lot of their good players, extending Christian Barmore. And like you said, I thought they did a pretty bang-up job with the draft class as well. So I would be stunned if he is not the guy who's running player personnel, whenever the search is over.
Yeah, the reason I like this draft so much is I think the team itself pre-draft is fascinating. Obviously, you have a new head coach in Javon Baker, and then there were just a lot of injuries on that defense, and I feel even the casual football fan understands when fully healthy, that Patriots defense can be kind of nasty. So I'm curious what your thoughts before we dive into the actual tape on these guys, your thought on the draft and the strategy of, hey, let's take a swing on the quarterback and then let's just surround him with as much talent as possible.
Yeah, so Drake Maye, I was also a huge fan.
Yeah.
I think in terms of upside and where you're projecting these guys to be in 4 years, I think Caleb Williams was in his own tier. That guy is just an absolute freak, and the things he can do, the way he can contort his body and adjust his arm slots and just the creativity are unlike anybody else in this draft class. So then it was okay, is it going to be Jaden? Is it going to be Drake? I just think Drake, one, the arm talent and the size were 2 things where it's you can underrate size and arm talent if you want to, but when you're playing in Foxborough, those things do matter, especially when the wind gets bad. We saw last year where there was, against the Jets, it was like a huge snowstorm. Going to one end of the field, Bailey Zappi could not throw into the wind. As soon as the quarter switched, I was like, they're going to try that same throw again downfield, and it's going to work. Lo and behold, it did. So these things really do make a difference. Beyond that, I think Drake Maye, for someone who only started 2 seasons and is only 21 years old, showed some impressive moments of football IQ. And even when he did make mistakes, which I'm going to get into in one of these clips, where you're not really sure whether or not he really was attuned to what the defense was doing pre-snap, he has the talent to make up for it. I wanted my own little guys as well back there. I saw that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised she's not up here right now.
Luke is the unofficial mascot of the YouTube channel, so it's just going to keep happening.
So then the wide receivers. I really like Jalen Polk. I thought he was more of a third-round guy, but it was obvious he's a great football player. Doesn't have the explosiveness that I thought they needed, where Xavier Legette was my guy for them. They tried to trade up for Legette. Yeah, but he doesn't have that kind of explosive athleticism, but he can win downfield, great hands, always in control, it feels like, when he's running routes, and the pace reminds me of Jacoby Myers. But also he's just like got a little bit more juice than Jacoby. So I really like that pick. Javon Baker, I think, has the opportunity to be potentially like a focal point of this offense, where Alex Van Pelt loves his 3-by-1 formations. He didn't use them as much when he was with the Packers, but kind of Devontae Adams was that guy more in like 2016, 2017, where 3-by-1, you put him backside and you let him kind of go to work. Then when he was with the Browns, it was more Amari Cooper, where especially against man coverage, like the offense kind of ran through him. I think Javon Baker, he's no Amari Cooper, but they win in similar ways where they're very dynamic route runners. They're not elite athletes, but they've got enough burst. Although, again, I think Amari Cooper is on a different level there. But in their ability to win those one-on-one matchups, and just a different mentality for Baker, where this dude's wired in a way that you don't usually see. I think he's going to bring a lot to that receiver room, and just through his play and effort, I think is going to probably emerge as a leader early on. I thought the offensive line picks were solid. Caden Wallace is a guy who's going to be transitioning from right to left tackle. He does have the explosive athleticism. His testing numbers were fantastic. His arm reach, I've heard it talked about a lot, is something he uses well. I think that's part of his game where I feel like he doesn't make first significant contact very often, and that kind of scares me. Independent hand use is an area where I think he could get better, but I see the vision for it, and I trust Scott Peters and Robert Kugler and, Van Pelt to make that work. Layden Robinson is another interesting guy. Long arms, good first step. He can lock you up once he gets his hands on you. Not the best when it comes to mirroring, but, when you have that length and that power in your hands, I think you can overcome that a little bit. Then some other guys that got later in the draft. Joe Milton was a really interesting pick, quarterback.
Yes, it was.
Jaheim Bell, the tight end, who I thought in the 7th round,
dude,
phenomenal value.
If you just were a college football fan, and Jaheim Bell was just like the ultimate gadget player. He's a fascinating watch, and like hard to evaluate as a prospect, but for a 7th round flyer, that's a fun one.
Exactly. That's a guy I was really excited about. And then Marcellus Dial, the one defensive player they actually did get, but he's a guy who has the size and explosiveness they typically look for, especially with their later round DBs. He's got great versatility, a lot of ball production, needs to turn more of his past breakups, which he had I think 2 seasons with double-digit breakups. That's awesome. Shows you he's in position. He can find the ball, but he doesn't do a great job at actually turning those opportunities into turnovers, which I feel like will be the biggest thing that holds him back from being, a better player in the league. But I could see him at least being in the rotation pretty early on. So I think this is a class full of guys that could contribute pretty early. Not Joe Milton for obvious reasons, but I could see each of these guys having some kind of role early on, with even some of the mid-round picks potentially being starters by the time the season's over.
Yeah, I mean, I was super high on Polk and Baker as well. Honestly, those 2 receivers and May, I was just those are all guys I just loved watching. I'm going to let you cook, Taylor. We're going to give you the reins, show us some film. I'm going to try and chime in on stuff I see or questions I might have. But we're handing the reins to you. I'm excited to dive in.
All right, so this is one of the craziest plays, I think, in Drake Maye's entire catalog. So 4th and 21. Obviously, this is a blowout. They're not coming back, but I thought this was a great example of his resiliency, where you saw there were games last year where they were getting blown out against NC State, Clemson. But Drake Maye was still competing. He was still trying to make plays, and you didn't really see him get rattled to the point where it's all right, the game's over. He still made some crazy plays in these kinds of situations. So, again, 4th and 21 in a blowout game. I'm watching this and kind of all right, the game's over. I'm not really thinking anything of it. And then he unleashes this crazy play. So what's going to happen here is they're actually sending a pretty nasty look for the situation. Considering it's a blowout, I don't know why they're this crazy, but it looks like it's going to be some kind of middle field close structure where it's either cover 3, cover 1, whatever it is. But you do see you got this post safety right here. Looks like man coverage down to the bottom, but it's a little bit of, maybe zone with some man kind of mixed in. But then they go kind of bonkers where it's actually going to be a version of Tampa 2 where you're going to get this guy playing in the deep middle. So he's basically just trying to take anything up the pole. Then you're going to have a split field look with this corner right here actually coming on a blitz. So this is something I noticed a couple of times in Drake Maye's tape where they would have a boundary corner blitz. And whether he knew it was coming pre-snap or not, he just didn't really care. And typically you throw into the blitz like this, where you'll actually see the receiver right here kind of puts his hands up afterwards and it's like, oh, I'm wide open. Just give me the ball. But in this situation, that's not really going to do much good. Drake Maye is going to stand in and deliver, again, one of the craziest throws that I saw him make, despite the fact he's got a guy dead to right. So this guy's also going to come on a blitz. But we're going to see, again, closed safety structure. You're not really thinking this is going to be anything too wild. Then as we rotate, you see this guy's going to take a deep half. The slot defender is going to take another deep half. And you got this guy running down the middle. And UNC is going to run a high-low concept over the middle with this guy going kind of on an intermediate route, this guy coming underneath. But this is the key. I think that might be Tez Walker. He's running a vertical route. And this defender looks like he's squatting on some kind of outbreaking route, which you kind of see pretty typically in these kind of situations. If you have a good idea of what might be coming, UNC liked a lot of those plays where the outside guy runs clear and then the slot receiver sometimes runs an out route. That's not what's going to happen. Instead, you get this guy unblocked. This corner's coming, whistling down at Drake Maye. But with this defender squatting, this receiver who's running the vertical is actually going to get open in this little void right here because the safety has his hips turned inside. There's no way he's getting the sideline at this point. I think Drake sees how the structure looks, where everybody's kind of in the middle of the field. And I don't know if he knew, again, that the corner was coming, but you can see he feels it because he starts to creep up a little bit in the pocket and then unleashes this ridiculous throw while he's getting hit. Hits the receiver in stride for a long touchdown. Again, this play doesn't really matter much in the grand scheme of things because the game was pretty much over. But seeing the competitiveness, the fact that Drake Maye is willing to stand in, knowing he might get hit, you can see that he does sense this guy is coming, steps up, and delivers an absolutely gorgeous throw to shred the coverage. Also an example where I feel like he did a really good job understanding how to attack different type of coverage structures where if you're playing cover 2, he's going to try to hit you down the seams. If you're playing quarters, he wants to attack if one of the safeties inside isn't playing with enough depth. He's going to hit you on a deep post, and then it's probably going to be a touchdown, at least like a 50-yard gain. So the recognition, the resiliency, the toughness, all the things you really like in Drake Maye's game.
Man, psychotic by Notre Dame to be running a blitz on 4th and 20-something?
4th and 21. Sure, if you want to do it, go ahead. DC is just having fun, but it didn't exactly work out in his favor.
It's so funny because it almost feels like a cover 2 hole shot, except from just insane depth. And then even then, he just has that arm talent where that safety just can't even get over the top of it because he's just able to, launch it so deep. That cannon is absolutely there. I mean, I keep seeing it, and it's kind of why, I don't love the comparisons, but a lot of people have said Herbert and even Josh Allen, and there are definitely some of those qualities to it as far as the arm talent goes.
Yeah, with Herbert, like you said, Herbert and Allen are in their own category.
Yes,
I basically
it takes a lot to get there.
Exactly, those guys are full-on aliens, but Drake Maye is superhuman in that way, where it's definitely not normal. But again, those guys, it's kind of unfair. So now I'll move on to the receiver. Actually, no, let's go to the end zone side. I forgot I even had this in, but a little more appreciation for what he's able to do here. So those guys get picked up. Free defender coming right at him. Another thing, Drake Maye is a long-levered guy, so he gets some criticism because his windup can be a little long. You see this consistently on his tape, where when he knows he's going to get hit, he'll get it out on time. Very rarely it happened a couple of times where he would try to throw knowing he was going to get hit and it didn't work out. But more often than not, he can get the ball out when he needs to, and then ridiculous that he's able to hit his guy in stride basically from the opposite hash. He drifts inside a little bit, but to throw that far downfield when you have that alignment is just absolutely filthy.
It almost feels like he's drifting a little bit to give himself that extra half second to get that ball out.
Another area of criticism you see a lot from him, where I do think he gets in trouble with the overstriding, And sometimes I think because UNC's offensive line was so inconsistent, he
Yeah.
felt like there was a survival instinct where he kind of had to. And again, he gets himself, I think he was pressured 27% of the time it was on him. And that's where I think sometimes he'll try to get away so far. He ends up right behind his offensive tackle.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I get where it's coming from. But more often than not, it was because he knew a blitz was coming from somewhere and he was just trying to buy himself time, which I thought was very impressive. Again, for a guy who only started for 2 seasons.
For sure. It's one of those things I am worried a little bit about, like bad habits being picked up when, you are such a focal point of an offense that was kind of limited in offensive line play. And, Tez Walker obviously came in late in the picture last year, but, he can only do so much. So you're worried, how many of those habits get ingrained in him. But fortunately, again, he's still young. He's still got plenty of football left to play.
Right. And that's what the hope is that you get him with a good coaching staff. That's a big reason I think you see people say you don't want to rush him out there. You don't want a Mac Jones situation where he does get bad habits because he's getting hammered. I do think the Patriots offensive line is better than people give it credit for. Like I think Chuks Okorafor, multi-year starter, wasn't on the left side, but I think pass protection is his strength. So I think the transition, he played there in college as well. I don't think it should be too difficult. And even though Cole Strange's injury history is a little shaky the past couple of years, he had 2 knee injuries last season. They got Layden Robinson, so if they need a guy who can come in and start, you got him and Nick Leverett. I think they should be good.
Cool.
So here we got Jalen Polk. Now, this is an example of how he's got pretty deceptive vertical speed. Again, he's not a burner or anything like that, but when he gets a speed release and he can just get past guys, he does a pretty good job at least stacking so he has the advantage. And then he makes that even better with his crazy catch radius where he will fully extend, whether it's like falling backwards or just having to lay out completely for passes, he will do what he needs to do to get the ball. So here
his drop rate was just crazy low, right?
Yeah, I think just doesn't have like 2 or 3 on the season. Yeah. And drops are so tough to track because sometimes it's just like a bad ball from the quarterback. And Penix and Drake Maye actually had pretty similar accuracy numbers where I think they're like uncatchable targets were pretty similar. Their plus accuracy was pretty similar, but both guys where it's kind of in between. And you got plenty of examples of Jalen Polk, although obviously Penix is putting a lot of passes on a dime. There's also some where sometimes his receivers had to make a play. So here, you're going to see him kind of slow play the release a little bit, just getting the defender's grill. Then he accelerates past. And what he does a good job of, Baker does too, is kind of taking away that shoulder sometimes. So there's different ways to beat a jam late in the route where you can either swipe it away or sometimes just get the lean where a defender tries to hit you and it kind of throws their balance off because they miss. Yep. So kind of takes away the shoulder here. Step for step, you can see he's kind of got his arms locked with the defender. Good tactic if you want to just keep positioning where that guy can't really gain ground on you and you're really in control. So you see he's got him locked up. He's still got that one arm free. As the ball comes, he gets it free. Both hands, goes up, fully extends for this pass with the guy right on his hip. And there's a lot of this with Jalen Polk where he will do whatever he's got to make sure he's the one who's getting the ball at the catch point. Just a tactician, man. Such good ball skills. Tracking are phenomenal from him. I'm just excited to see what he and Drake Maye can do, especially now that they have Javon Baker, who I think Polk can play X. I think he's better in the slot and as a Z in that Jacoby Myers type role. But his ability to win vertically in these types of situations because of his frame and his catch radius and his ability to get good positioning downfield is going to be a huge asset for this offense.
I also think, defense are going to have to respect him as a blocker. I'm a wide receiver coach in high school. At least I was this past year. And I was like, hey, I played fullback. The only thing you guys are going to learn that you're going to be really good at is blocking. And it's undervalued how much that can really spring the run game. And I feel like in the run, he just kept showing up for me, just kind of finishing blocks, sticking to guys, especially as I'm trying to watch the 2025 receivers right now. Too many of them maybe can get engaged with a guy, but then they just cannot stick to him. So to see that Polk can do that, I think it'll be a huge asset for the backfield as well.
I like that with both of these young receivers for the pass. I don't think Baker does as good of a job at sustaining his blocks. Polk is definitely better there, but the effort is unquestionable. There's a play in this game. I wasn't sure if I should have pulled it up. I probably should have. Well, he's blocking a linebacker. And what you'll see a lot with Polk is he'll have someone coming full speed at him downhill while he's stationary about to block. He doesn't care. He eats the contact and then is still engaged and still tries to win.
I love that.
Fired up. Yeah. It's so exciting. And there's so many guys in this class where I was watching and I was like, yeah, they'll block when they have to, but it doesn't look like something that's a priority for them. These guys love to block. I got another Polk play here. This is one where you're kind of going to get an opportunity to see his ability as a route runner a little bit more. So as you see the inside out move there and then finishing with a couple defenders in the area. So this is another one where he's going to get off coverage, but he's got to set up this defender because he looks like he's trying to clear a path inside. So first, he's going to gain ground a little bit, give a fake to the outside to get the defender to widen a little bit.
Yep.
Come back inside and make sure he makes that contact, swipes away when the defender tries to slow him down, gets the stack. The ball's not underthrown. I think it's honestly perfect considering what the coverage is because you got that safety right over the top.
Yeah.
And I just love the concentration from Polk where sometimes you want to go up and get the ball and sometimes you just want to let it come to you so you can make that body catch because, sometimes receivers get criticism for not fully going out and attacking, but there's times where that also gives defenders an opportunity to potentially attack the ball because if they're not looking at you, they're reading your hand. So if you go up and try to snag it, they can punch it out. So here with these defenders chasing him, he lets the ball come to him and again, makes a catch with 2 defenders in the area. Another example of his great toughness. And once again, just the route, being able to move the defender and create a lane for himself. Out, physicality, swiping through contact to get over there, and then finishing downfield.
What I really like about this, if you want to rewind it to the hips of where the DB is, it's it's a back pedal, but his hips are kind of leaning towards, that inside release. As soon as Polk feigns outside, you can watch shoulders and hips turn just a slight bit. We tell receivers too, by the second you've done that and then you get him to turn, you've already won because he has to regain that speed as he turns. So that's just an easy beater right there. Just wait for him to commit and then you can cut back inside. That's easy money.
And that's why guys like him and Baker, no, they're not the fastest guys, but in the NFL, usually all you need is a step. Because once you get this guy in this position where he's chasing you, he can't really run as fast as he wants to. Yeah. So especially when it comes to, at best case scenario, he's going to have to look back for the ball, and that might slow him down. So you're in a winning position here. And again, just Polk being able to maximize his physical gifts. So now we get to Javon Baker, my guy. Let me see which one this is, just so this is a fun one. So this is a play where a lot of Baker's success came deep down the field. Great ball skills, great at the catch point. Get some criticism for drops, which is kind of valid. I think it's kind of like Drake Maye's turnover-worthy plays, though, where they don't happen a ton relative to, how often for Javon Baker he's being targeted. They just look really bad because sometimes he'll have a drop and he pops it in the air and then he gets picked off. And it's just worst case scenario and it kind of gets grilled into your brain. But for the most part, I think he does a great job at the catch point and he's underrated in terms of a short route runner. He didn't get a ton of opportunities to win in this level of the field when he was at UCF, but there were flashes, especially on slants, where he'll use a diamond release where you're basically trying to sell an outside vertical route, get the defender to flip their hips to the outside, and then you cut back underneath. And again, another thing I love about this play is how Baker immediately when he gets the pass, he goes into yak mode where you can see a flip switches and he's like, all right, how do I position myself to get through contact and make a play after the catch? So here you see that diamond release where getting the defender's grill, get that outside where you see the defender's hips are turned. Now he's got an easy path to get inside, tries to slow him down with the jam, doesn't work. And this is where he gets to work. So the pass actually gets batted by this defender right here. You can kind of see he's going to get a hand on this. And then the path is kind of obscured. Baker doesn't care, goes up, makes the catch, quickly puts it away. Also, another thing I think he does a really great job of, understands that he's got 2 defenders coming downhill and 1 on his back hip. As soon as he hits the ground, he's going to reverse path and then make this guy miss, just ridiculous. He does this pretty frequently on passes like this. And then the effort afterwards, where he's not just going to make a guy miss. He wants to be physical, kind of a running back mentality, get his hand in the defender's chest and try to get as many yards as possible afterwards. Not a super dynamic guy after the catch, but that toughness and play style I feel like is very valuable, where he's still going to be able to get, if you need a 3rd and 5 and maybe it's, a quick pattern where he's got to get a couple extra yards himself. I feel like more often than not, he's going to be able to do that.
I mean, this kind of hammers home my 2 favorite aspects of Baker when I was watching him pre-draft is just the route running and releases and then the body control. So he can haul in catches outside of his frame. I just love that because if you can get open and, help your quarterback a little bit when it's not a perfectly accurate throw, that's a winning football player at the NFL level.
Yeah. And especially with Drake Maye, the biggest thing with him is accuracy, specifically in the quick game and the short game. So having Polk and Javon Baker, who can be pretty much accuracy erasers, is going to be huge for him, especially early on. This is one. So this is against potential NFL competition. This is Kobe. I think it's Kobe Turner, I believe. I may be getting that mixed up, but I do know this is a guy who's on the list in terms of someone who's going to be drafted next season at corner. Another example of him being manipulative in his routes. This isn't against press, but he does a good job eating cushion and then faking the inside slant route. So one, you'll notice in the stem, he's feigning inside, trying to get the defender to squeeze the route, then explodes upfield, completely forces the defender to spin around. Like, this is the stuff you love with him, where once defenders get in their head, all right, we got to stop the slant. We got to stop the slant. With Alex Van Pelt, as you know, he does like to incorporate a double move every once in a while. So then just being able to create this kind of separation. And not only that, this should be a touchdown, where if you hit him in stride, he's probably going to the end zone, but it's underthrown. And then you see his ability to slow down, go up, and win the ball at the catch point with the defender right there between his hands, get both feet in bounds, which is another area he needs to be more consistent in. He doesn't always get both feet down. Now, sometimes he was just in really tough positions, where I think it was against Oklahoma, where he like speared a pass when he was in the end zone, like ridiculously effortless. But then he only gets 1 foot down because it just was tough with body positioning. But here he knows the boundary's close, both feet down before he gets out of bounds. Good awareness, and just more examples of him just being a dynamic route runner, both at the short level and then being able to set that up and win down the field. So one more time.
It's also so hard, like when he plants that foot there and then transitions into the double move, like without sacrificing speed on it too. Like that's just a quality you don't see in a lot of guys.
And you mentioned earlier the body control, where it's not even just how he moves, it's also his ability to change pace so easily, how quickly he can decelerate and just stop on a dime, how quickly he gets the top speed and uses different pacing and routes to make defenders uncomfortable. Like I think I saw maybe 2 times where he actually got jammed and couldn't get off the line, but even still you see him fight through it. But he consistently will use like different speeds where defenders are like, all right, I don't know if he's just trying to play me right now, if he's going through me, or what's going to happen. So yeah, those are just a couple of examples of the body control, the competitiveness, which is what I really think is going to make him more than just a good receiver. I think it could get him into that pretty great receiver territory. There was one quote he had when he was on Steve Smith's podcast, and he was talking about Pat Surtain and, you know, what it was like to go up against that guy, where he was like, yeah, I actually had to start watching film because this dude was legit. He's out here trying to feed his family. And he mentioned that kind of reminded me of Kobe, where he would use his left hand in tournaments as a kid to try to make sure he was getting better and more well-rounded. Javon Baker said, I'm not trying to attack your weaknesses. Like, I already know what you're bad at. I want to see what you're good at and then see how I match up with how good you are. Like, you don't hear that very often from any player, where it's like, no, I want to be challenged as competitively as possible to make myself better. And, you know, the play style and the effort comes through in the way he is on the field. I'm really excited about these guys.
I mean, how many like star receivers do you know that aren't competitive sickos, right? Like it's just, they're all a little crazy and I love it. Will he make people in wheelchairs stand up? That's what I want to know.
I think so. I cannot speak. I have never been bound to a wheelchair, but I will say he is very exciting. And I think I think there's a video actually where like he's in like a nursing home or something. And he literally, a guy in a wheelchair does stand up. So we have video proof if you want to go out there and find it.
Oh, outstanding. Well, Taylor, man, like I really appreciate you coming on. I already was super high on those 3 guys and like honestly even more fired up now. I am from Indy though, so I don't know if I'm allowed to root for the Patriots. I think a lot of my a lot of my hometown friends might not want to hear that. But I'll be keeping a close eye. You know, I was super high on Drake Maye. I just, from his time as like a redshirt freshman that first year starting, I was like, who the heck is this kid with like no college experience showing up playing like it's nothing, playing like backyard ball. So appreciate your time. Where can everyone find you? What are you working on right now? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, thank you again, brother. I appreciate you having me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. You can find me at tkyles39. You can find me on YouTube at my show Patriots Daily on Patriots Press Pass. And if you want to read my work, I write for CLNS Media, so just clnsmedia.com. You'll find some of my stuff. And I also contribute at Pat's Pulpit every once in a while. So another great resource if you're trying to get some Patriots insights.
Outstanding. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on. This has been Draft Talk. I won't say go Patriots or anything like that. But thanks so much for coming on. We'll be back next week. TBD on guests. We're working on that. But thank you for watching, listening. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you're subscribing wherever you're watching it, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Go Pats.